evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Luke Shanofsky, and you are now a part of the 1,000 Minutes of Listening podcast, brought to you by Rigoberto Menchu's review on iTunes, rated 5 stars, saying, "This is the best podcast ever. Gets me through every single one of my flights, no problem." Well, thank you, Rigoberto. Means a lot to me. However, I do feel that that little quote is a bit outdated now, considering our current status in the world, seeing as there's a big pandemonium and plague affecting us right now. But you know what? I appreciate it, Rigoberto. It means a lot. Now, on to the topic at hand today, as I've already mentioned, the plague, the virus that is spreading across the world and hopefully subsiding very soon. Talking, of course, about coronavirus, COVID 19, however you would like to call it. Now, for starters, I'd just like to make one or two points about this virus in case you haven't heard of it, which I highly doubt, unless you're in, I don't know, perhaps Greenland or the middle of the North Pole in Santa's workshop, somewhere magical. Some kind of magical realism, if you will. Hey, um, all right, for starters, coronavirus spread or really started in Wuhan, in the Wuhan laboratories that were co funded by the United States, where they were actually researching the virus beforehand because they presumably knew that there could be a possible outbreak one day. However, they seem to have started the outbreak after some scientist or researcher perhaps dropped a vial of the stuff or something, got himself infected, and well, didn't follow proper safety protocols. Maybe he didn't know, or maybe he was just trying to juke the system. We truly don't know. However, since then, it has spread far and wide through China, hopped on a plane toward the United States, and as of February 16th, has been documented in the United States. Within the first 2 weeks of being in the United States, it actually accumulated over 10,000 reported cases, which is, well, frankly, quite terrifying. Much more now, much more deaths now as well. I don't have an official number on the deaths, however, I'm sure it's not pretty, and I almost don't want to look at it because, well, I'm not a morbid human. However, nonetheless, it's quite fascinating and ties in quite nicely to this book I've been reading by the name of 100 Years of Solitude, which is, well, about a story about a civilization by the name of Macondo, which has, well, it's had its fair share of circumstances fall upon it from an insomnia plague, which is, well, both similar and very different to the coronavirus, especially how it was handled by the general public. Now, this is the most interesting part I kind of want to touch on in our little time here. However, first I'd like to acknowledge how the virus was spread both to America and in Mukondo. Now, for starters, we can assume that the virus was brought over to the United States by a man visiting China. It was brought over by a plane, since a cruise or something of the sort doesn't seem too likely, nor does it seem to fit into the time frame truly. But however, it does happen occasionally. But you'll see that like the Spanish flu or something of the sort. While in Macondo, it was brought over by a girl by the name of Rebecca, whom carried her parents' bones, which is rather interesting, in a little pouch. Nonetheless, they were both brought in by a person, and in both cases, what followed was quite similar as far as how it was treated. Now, I'll speak on a personal account here. When I first heard of coronavirus, I was actually sitting in my physics class. It was a January day, I believe, late January. And there were talks of, well, it was more of there were jokes being made of how every century in the 20s, 1920, 1820, 1720, there was always a big outbreak, a big plague, if you will, something large that killed a lot of people, whether it be a virus, a bacterium, whatever, and how it spread. And we were like, haha, that's very funny, right? Now in 2020, something might happen as well. In fact, I believe this was even December. I was having these jokes with my friends. It wasn't until January where the coronavirus was starting to become more well known. Nonetheless, we saw all these jokes and these memes, if you will, and we all laughed at them. Ha ha! 2020, big virus. What could happen? Because truly, what could happen? Well, then there were reports of some mysterious virus up in China being reported. Nobody really knew what this was. It was just called coronavirus, or the mystery virus, whatever. Pretty like we all joked about it. Truthfully, it's quite funny to think about now. It's almost like the start of any horror movie. You're joking about the thing, making jokes about it before it comes and snatches you like a shark out of the water. We were laughing at it. Haha. What this couldn't happen really, could it? Let's be honest. Virus, big one on 2020, the year of this of all the years, to follow along with this joke. Well, we all laughed and none of us took it seriously until the last minute where it was finally getting reported in the United States. And that's when it started to really hit like, oh, this is actually quite serious. Even while it was in the United States, I thought, hey, this is going to blow over. Hell, my friends all thought, hey, this is going to blow over. And it wasn't until I watched uh, a well known scientist, he called himself like a detective of viral outbreaks because what he would do, he was assigned by the government, or at least by the CDC, to track down the epicenter of these outbreaks and these viroids and whatnot, how they spread, determine the cause, all this. He went onto a show and he talked about it and talked about what this virus may entail for us. And it wasn't until that Tuesday, and I remember it clearly, it was a Tuesday. I was sitting from my computer watching this show that I realized there's a little more to this than I thought. And it was that moment I started looking up more and more about it. And I realized that most of the cases reported were within 15 miles of my house. Um, and that was kind of like a heart sinking moment. Like, hold on. I thought we had this under control. I didn't think this was an actual issue. You know, I thought this was going to blow over. At the time, China was still withholding a lot of information. They were silencing press. And I thought to myself, like, wow, hold on. This is a real issue. And by Thursday, I realized they were shutting down New Rochelle altogether, with Westchester having the highest reported amount of cases in the nation, which is where I happen to live. And that's when all the jokes started coming towards me, like, hey, Luke, I hope you make it back, haha, and whatnot. And, they were really funny at the time, I'm not going to lie. However, they're also a little worrying because I was thinking now, holy, holy mother of God, this is actually an issue and it's actually happening. And I feel like that parallels 100 Years of Solitude very, very closely. You see, in 100 Years of Solitude, most of the people, when they first catch this virus, they don't treat it very seriously. The insomnia plague, if you will. They see it almost as a gift. They no longer have to sleep. They're now able to work longer hours for their jobs, and you know, yeah, yeah, that's what they all said. Yeah, whatever. We'll live with it. Sure, why not? Nobody took it seriously. Absolutely nobody. Just like here. And aside from those who knew what was happening, it wasn't until the later symptoms started to kick in that many of the people of Macondo start to realize, oh shoot, I shouldn't have been so easy-footed about this one. Then they start to catch dementia, start to ruin many lives, killed many people. Many forgot who they even were. And if they had just acted accordingly, there's not much they could have done, to be fair. But if we did something different, maybe this could have been a completely different story to tell. So it's a bit of a shame. However, I thought I should touch on that. Now, something else I want to talk about here is how China dealt with this whole thing initially. I mentioned earlier they silenced the press because they really did. China, for a while, was trying to keep this as low to the ground as possible. They didn't want anybody to know. They silenced reporters. In fact, there's still some reporters who went to China to talk about this missing. Many of them still haven't been heard from to this day. And while we could assume, oh, maybe they just got lost in the streets, they caught it, they died, there would have been some kind of word about it from them, wouldn't have there been? Instead, we're led to believe that China must have, well, silenced them, for lack of better words, as I stated earlier. They didn't want this negative attention on them. They didn't want to be known as the propagators of this virus. And it also holds true to how they've been dealing with other things, other aspects of this. For instance, they've been saying that it's racist to call the Wuhan virus when in reality it's not. They just simply don't want their name associated with it. It's like calling Ebola Ebola, named after the Ebola River nearby to where it was discovered. There's no difference. You could argue, oh, but Spanish flu and this and that, since Spanish flu wasn't started in China, it's actually been rumored or been thought to have started likely at a military base in the United States or even France, oddly enough. That doesn't really hold true because that was a case of propaganda. And we're not talking about propaganda, we're talking about the truth here. And end of the day, the coronavirus, the Wuhan virus, started in the Wuhan laboratories in Wuhan, China. But in the end, the virus ended up creating a kind of contempt for outsiders in many nations once it really started to gain traction, especially after Italy, where we saw the death number or total death number recorded, not total because many were unrecorded in China mostly. When the number rose and doubled in one day across the world, quote unquote, we saw, like I said, a large contempt for many outsiders in many nations. Um, Similarly to Macondo, once this plague really hit, uh, many people start to avoid contact, start to treat people from the outside with disdain, rather rather unkindly, to be fair. However, it was all understandable, and many also self-isolated. Not necessarily too many in Macondo. However, here in the United States, many are self-isolating for good reason. It's because they have to, frankly, to not spread this. And many, especially many older gentlemen and ladies, uh, show a lot of disdain for those who intrude on their personal space, as it's kind of putting their line on the risk, and it's a little selfish of the youngsters and whatever who just don't really care about this very much because they're not really realizing it's larger than just their own little personal bubble. But look, the point of the matter is, um, nobody likes to have their personal space infringed upon in a time like this, and it shows in both the wonderful book by Garcia Marquez and real life. However, frankly, there's some things in the book that almost put the coronavirus to shame. As well, the coronavirus, we know it's a pneumonia of sorts. It fills your lungs with water, makes it difficult to breathe. While the insomnia plague is, as it states, an insomnia plague. You lose your memory, loss of cognitive abilities, and such. And yeah. However, something that the book illustrates quite terrifyingly is just how horrible this loss of memory can be. In fact, there was a quote from the book which states, and I quote, "The farmers put signs on their cows to remind them that the cows have to be milked for milk, which can be drank," end quote. That line alone is quite terrifying. Not only do you not understand the outside world, as with the cow and the livelihood, however, you also forget your own name in many instances. And just living a world like that, I couldn't imagine. Not understand who you are, what you do, how to even open a door for it to get really bad. However, seems a little far fetched, a little magical realism, if you will. More on that in the next episode. Yet, as we live and die, I suppose all we can really do is look forward as much as we can, look toward the positive. Unless, of course, you don't even know what the past is, since your mind has been wiped by a plague of sorts. However, that's an issue for another day. My heart truly goes out to all those affected by the virus. Um, Even my friend, my close friend, Alejandro, was affected by the virus over in New Jersey. He actually caught it. He was actually isolating in a completely separate part of his house from his own family. It's quite scary, actually. I was on a call with him not too long ago. His coughing was very severe. He couldn't really hold his breath for long, but he recovered. Nice to hear. His family's all right. But nonetheless, my heart really goes out to all those affected. Um, in the end, it is what it is. We'll just try and get through it all together. We have now been on air for 1,000 seconds. This has been the 1,000 Minutes of Listening podcast. And on that note, have a very wonderful rest of your day. I hope to catch you on the next episode.